I wore my tall Sambas, and they're still not tall enough. All right, you can hear me okay? I opted for not the walk around the stage mic. I'm not a dancer. I don't know how to work the stage, so we're going to stay put. Good morning. Very excited to talk to you all. I am a big fan of Email Insider Summit, always a fan of the event in Utah, so it's the first time I've been out of Deer Valley. I'm excited to be with you guys today. Let's talk. All right, so as mentioned, my presentation is really about how we've managed to work through our lapsed customer base. As mentioned, we have a lot of customers to talk to that we've, 123-year-old company. We've been around for a bit, and a lot of our customers have too. So how do we maintain a relationship with them and try to win them back, hopefully before they actually leave? So we'll talk about that a little bit. All right. And this is just telling you about ourselves a little bit. We proudly serve customers at more than 650 stores. Really, where we started was a brand that was about the golden rule, right? And we try to maintain that today, ensure that we're talking to our customer about the things that matter most to them, and helping fulfill those things for them in their lives, as opposed to us just selling stuff. Although, we're pretty good at that too. All right, so as you might imagine, just as varied as our customers are the reasons why they might lapse. So, you can't have a single approach to how you talk to that customer. You need to make sure that you're looking at the reasons why they might have lapsed or might be lapsing. So, some of the questions that we've asked ourselves as we look at these customers is, how has the lapsing customer's behavior changed? How long has it been since they've visited? Can we discern a pattern from a segment, potentially? We were really into segments this last 2.5 years. Very much looking at, these groups of customers and some likenesses we can find. As you might imagine, no customer group is a monolith, but there's some patterns we can discern, and I think it's super important for us to suss those out. And then can we increase traffic with special offers for customers whose behavior has changed? Is there a pattern or trend in a particular region? This is actually something that came up last summer, and we'll talk about this one a little more deeply. Have there been local store closures or other impacts? I'm going to say this on behalf of my social team. Anytime we post something, we get a handful of, I didn't even know you guys were still open. And it hurts our hearts, of course. That's some of the hearts and minds we're trying to change. But it's always funny to get that note and say, well, no, we've been in your community for as long as I've been around, and that's 43 whole years. So it's just funny getting those responses, but also not funny. We need to make sure that we're reaching out to those customers and the folks around them. So we look at that. Has there been slowing traffic patterns because of store closures, or is it simply just that region, for whatever reasons, disconnecting? And can we increase traffic with that group by providing more localized content? And then how's our customer shopping behavior changing season to season? This has become a big one for us. It's great that you came in for back to school. How do we make sure that we're providing the same need or fulfilling those same needs for you in holiday shopping? Or if you came for holiday, how do we get you to come back in for spring to refresh your wardrobe? So that is a big part of our lapsing strategy as well. So let's talk about time-based reactivation. These are special offers. Obviously, I think a lot of us, when we're in a lapsing customer, the first thing we think about is, well, what can I get them to come back in, like money-wise? So that's where we'll start. Special offers driving online and in-store purchase in particular. So our team has maintained an 18-month churn campaign for many years. Whenever I joined, it was already existing. As far as I'm concerned, that's far too long to wait for somebody to come back, but we also have a lengthy buying cycle. So we wanted to be more proactive in the approach. We tested several time-based campaigns to intervene sooner and to encourage engagement. Even if they weren't going to make the purchase, how do we plant the seed and get that click and at least get back into your consideration set early? So for our customers who'd not shopped in the last 90 days, it's early, right? Especially if you go from 18 months to 90 days, but the idea was, let's start planting those seeds early. We tested several dollars off coupons to see what was most effective and with whom those offers resonated. I didn't put this in the slide, but it was also to see how much we can offer without offering everything, right? Like, how do you get to that right number? And we found some surprises that we'll talk about in a slide in a second. Similarly, we tested free shipping, which actually resonated quite well with a lot of our customers, specifically our e-com only, but then our omni customers as well, who had not shopped in that 90 days. And the shipping threshold, this was actually a point of feedback that we had gotten often from customers. They might have built a cart and been all ready to go, but they didn't quite hit that threshold if at the time was like $99. as an aside, it's kind of hard to build a cart that big on JCPenney.com because the prices are so good. But, we find often that folks would say, I was so close, but I just don't feel comfortable paying that shipping. And like, we're in a market where you can't expect customers to pay for shipping. So anyway, a point that came up often. And then finally, we tested both percentage off coupons as well as dollars off just to see what resonated, because we see this even with our typical promotional stuff. Percentage might work for a while, and then the customer gets tired of seeing 30% off, and if you give her a price point or he a price point, they respond. So we wanted to make sure that we were testing and learning there. You guys would be impressed with the number of little work orders that we put in during this period as we were testing and learning. I know our creative team was like, please stop. So as you can see, we had this 90-day lapsing offer test. I'm not going to read into every piece here, but I will tell you, that we had some variables in our subject lines, right? We had variable offers. We went with this 20 off 60, a 20 off 70, a 20 off 80, like I mentioned, some sensitivity testing to understand how much we need to give in order to get that customer to come back in. And this is a short time period. Trying to get somebody to come back after 90 days, we were trying to figure out what our customer was willing to do. So I will take you to the next slide where we'll talk about results. I'm sorry, this is another test. I didn't practice enough, guys. The win-back modeling, so this is a slower frequency in the last 12 months. This is a different intervention, right? We had our 90-day that we knew there were shoppers. This is a group of people who had been shopping, but their frequency slowed, so we noticed a difference in cadence. So again, trying to intervene early instead of waiting until they fully lapsed, we just kind of watched how they were responding. This, we actually went out with the 35% coupon, which is quite rich for pennies. This is on top of whatever the regular discount is. And this last group was our 10-month inactive customer. And in this case, we actually took a different approach and said, not only are we going to offer you a discount, but we're also going to go after content that we know would be resonant with you, not just the coupon itself, although coupon delivery is their favorite. Giving them these pieces underneath to say, we know that you have shopped with us, and here are some of the categories that we know you've shopped in. So we've got a kids version there, we've got men's, we have women's, and then we've got home there at the end. So results varied by test, as you might imagine. Some were able to drive re-engagement with those in the early and middle stages of disengagement, and that was our goal. Again, trying to catch them before we actually called them lapsed. Some important learnings, though, that we found with these groups. Our best performing test was with our 90-day lapse customers, the 20 off 80. So we didn't have to give them our deepest discount. And then also the 20 off 50 with free shipping was really, they were really receptive to that. So we didn't have to give our deepest discount in order to get the customer to re-engage, which is great. And again, these customers are now active and no longer considered lapsing. Our e-com customer, again, was really receptive to the free shipping offer, with high click and conversion rates coming from both of those tests. We eventually moved to a lower shipping threshold as a result, so yay! Email taught everyone something. It was great. We're at, I think, a $49 ship now, so it's great. And then our win-back testing, we did see some success with those who hadn't shopped in the last 12 months. So that's 6 months before we would have had them in churn journey. But we saw even more success with those customers whose cadence was slowing down. So those folks who we were just kind of like, hi, remember us? We haven't talked to you in a while. They actually were responsive to that instead of us, again, just dumping them into the typical marketing cycle or waiting until 18 months out to talk to them again. And then for that 10-month inactive division-specific content tests, it was interesting. Of course, our hypothesis was we're talking to them about the stuff they came and saw us for, less than 10 months ago. Certainly they'll respond. Women's and home versions were the only ones who really drove conversion in those specific categories. Everyone else ended up shopping in those categories too. So it was interesting. You learned something, right? All right. Check my time. Okay. This one was a really fun test for us. We had gotten some requests from our leadership that some of our states that were bigger markets were seeing some slowing, specifically in store. So in a couple of conversations I've had this week already, there have been several instances since where we've seen a lot of movement back into store, but at this point we were still trying to push e-com. So this was last summer. But we wanted to reactivate those store shoppers by using some localized content. And I will tell you, like right at the top, the team, as we were coming up with this, felt like it was a little suspect. Maybe we played into some stereotypes, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. Texas was one of our states. I'm from Texas, so I can make fun of us. This past summer, as I mentioned, store traffic in 4 of our largest markets was slowing, so we quickly built a series of emails to encourage customers to shop in those markets. They were 3-touch series over the course of roughly 14 days. We had to make some movements. As you might imagine, the calendar's pretty packed. These were priority emails, but we still had to make some adjustments, so around 14 days. The story for each of those series and relevant product was selected with that location in mind. As mentioned, it was a total series extending across a 14-day period. The campaigns were heavily focused on these stories and products and intentionally did not call out price or promotion. So this is, very different than what we were talking about just a moment ago that was all price-led. There was no pricing within these emails at all. It was really just saying, hey, we see you and we want to invite you into the store. And the subject lines and body copy in the series all touched and highlighted the location to try and connect with that customer in the inbox and drive the open and click, although we talked about open not being a real thing anymore. And then though the purpose of the series was to drive store traffic, we went ahead and included a Find a Store and a Shop Now CTA just to make sure that they're included in here and allow the customer choice. I will make an aside here and say typically in my past life I would have told you a Find a Store button is irrelevant and customers who know you know your stores, but like I told you, some people thought we were closed. All right, so let's talk. We had, like I mentioned, 4 different states, so California and Florida are placed here. When I mentioned that we kind of leaned into stereotype at first, I was like, skaters, guys, we're gonna go with skaters. For California, we're gonna lean into California. It was cutesy copy, but we did actually see a really positive response rate from these. Actually, the skater style email had a really good conversion rate for us. It was kind of surprising because again, I was joking with the team. I was like, I don't know, guys, we're gonna offend somebody by being like, oh, you guys only care about skateboarding, but they were quite responsive to that. So it was fun. Actually, putting these emails together was great because we had to be cross-divisional in our approach, and we're department stores. Sometimes we get a little push from our merchant partners to not be so cross-functional in that way. But we wanted to grab the best of what we had that was representative of those areas. So there's Cali and Florida, and then New York and Texas. I think we got a cowboy hat in that third one on the Texas one. I liked it. In New York City, we tried to play into, being out and about. These were all summer, so we're trying to make sure we're responsive to, of course, the season, because that's the product we had, but also just to have a little bit of flavor of those localities in the creative. So we were able to achieve success both in online and in-store traffic with these series, which again was the big push. Like, how do we help these areas out a little bit? And of course, as soon as we did that, all the other states suddenly were like, oh, we need help with our traffic too. You guys should definitely do one for Connecticut. So we also uncovered several patterns within this, right? While our customers price sensitive and responsive to promotions, always, serving up relevant product, especially for those folks who were recently lapsed, was still helped them move. Like, we were able to connect with them in a way that was different than just saying, and it's all 30% off, because we say that a lot. They were gonna get that message as soon as they clicked through the site, but we focused on relevancy first. The concise content, hold on, let me go back. This is part of what was so exciting too, and never mind, y'all saw him. We had a hero, and we really limited ourselves on how much content we were going to include in those. When I first joined the team, we had some home emails. We talked about every single stitch of whatever we had in the store, and I get that. Like, our merchant partners and our integrated marketing partners, we have a lot to talk about, but that being concise and allowing the customer to click and then go find what they actually wanted, I think is really important. Telling our team often that the logo at the top of the email is what's going to get them the most traffic is always, their response is always, can we remove the logo? I'm like, no, we sent them a message and they want to shop. Anyway, being concise allows the customer to get through, digest, and move forward. So we saw some really good response there. We didn't have to show them everything to encourage them to shop us. Then the last send in each of these series had the highest open and conversion rates, which to me signaled our cadence was right. We talked to them often enough. They may have not super engaged with the first one, started to kind of warm up the second one, but the fact that they were responsive by the third one probably also indicated we didn't need a fourth one, right? But we were able to see that with all these series. We were hitting them with the right amount of content without overwhelming them, because these guys were still in the regular flow of marketing content. So these were, while they were prioritized, they were still receiving other marketing. All right, And then talking seasonal win back, which again was another conundrum we kind of ran into. It was like, all right, we see you at Christmas time and we never see you again. How do we talk to you throughout the year? Because we know you have other things you buy for. You've got a home that you probably refresh every season. So that again was driving that online and in-store purchase. While our most loyal customers tend to visit across all seasons, many only visit during back to school and holiday. There are other one and dones, as we call them, but those are two big, like if we could figure this out, maybe we can unlock the smaller events. We wanted to reactivate both last year and last season shoppers. So it was a kind of a two different approach, but we wanted to catch those folks that we saw last year to remind them, hey, we're still here, but also catch folks that we saw just last season to encourage them back in to see what we have that's new. So first, we sought to encourage those that had shopped last year to back to school time if they hadn't yet returned. And we also, in this case, included free shipping and that 20 off 50 that worked so well early on. That was actually, I didn't note this here, but that's one of the things that we carried forward in all of our other reactivation campaigns was we now know what works for a customer. Let's try it out in other scenarios. Within the back to school win back, we also tested a segment of customers who had purchased in the time frame but didn't buy within the kids division. So I think we refer to these guys as our back to routine. They didn't have presence of child in household, or they certainly weren't purchasing for a child, but they were still refreshing, after summer getting into fall. And then we sought to encourage those who shopped in the last season to come in to see what we had for them this season. And again, 20 off 50 for all these guys. So back to school was a couple different approaches. One was simply, back to school shopping with some categories underneath. Another one was specific to uniforms. Our uniform merchant was very convinced that it was just email that was keeping us from getting there. So we helped. And it didn't quite undo what they were behind, but we did help. No, uniforms is an important part of our business, as we all know. This is something that people buy in bulk. We actually have a reactivation for back to school or for uniforms that happens in the spring also, as kids grow out of stuff and wear things down. So, but in this case, this was for fall. And then back to routine, same thing. We had this kind of fresh start sort of approach. And the one on the right is actually one that was sent to customers to try to get them to come back in and reshop us after we'd seen them in the spring to encourage them to fall wardrobe with us. So while those campaigns didn't always drive sales in the predicted divisions, I will tell you, like, spoiler alert, the kids' emails actually drove more women's business, which was interesting. We were able to drive traffic and return trips from those targeted customers, so we still at least achieved the goal of bringing them back and reactivating them. It just may not have happened in the way we were expecting, which, a win's a win, guys. So we learned those who had shopped in the kids division last year weren't always moved to shop there again, even if re-engaged. The free shipping offer drove traffic and revenue, but not always in the same division as years past. So interesting learning. For those customers who did repurchase kids, they tended to complete that sale online, so free shipping was a relevant and valuable offer to that audience. I think part of it too, depending on the age of the child, you can kind of predict what size you need as opposed to having to go in and try stuff on, which was the case with my 15 and 12-year-old when they were little. Their 8-year-old brother he is not a typical size kid, so we have to go in and try things on, although we figured out our JCPenney sizes. But typically, I think you can repurchase online, so that actually worked out quite well. Also, if you think about the cost per piece for kids' clothing, a free shipping offers is nice. And then for seasonal reactivation, we did see some response from customers, but again, there was a higher percentage of those e-com than in-store sales, which e-com team was super excited about. In-store was just like, what's going on? We really do think even without that free shipping offer, it was just, again, people are comfortable, their sizes. If you're asking them to repurchase, it's an easier sell. For returning customers, e-com is a great channel to encourage trips between those bigger seasons, and that was kind of our finding. Fine, we can invite them to store, but how do we get them to shop e-com in between if they're not ready for a whole shopping trip? Check my time, you guys have been flying through it. So, as with most things in email, these findings will change over time, right? Like we think we've nailed it, and then human beings are human beings, so they change. So continuous testing and learning is the only way we can keep up with that customer. As mentioned at the beginning of this, I almost said of this call, you guys, of this, I noted they're not a monolith. Even if you've got them down to segments, those segments are going to change and react to the environment around them. What's happened in the last month is different than what we had experienced 5 years ago and everything in between. So staying on top of that, listening to your customer, watching those trends, and helping figure it out with them, I think is super important. So here's some final thoughts. Intervene early. It's always easier, just like with in a member, I cut my teeth corporately at Sam's Club. It's always easier to retain a member than it is to get a new one. It's also cheaper, right? So how do you intervene early and get that customer, they may not be lapsed yet, but how do you get them back in and keep them engaged, or, change it up a little bit? We heard from, conversations over the last 2 days, what they may have come in for may not be what they're still here for. So how do we expose them to other areas too? Don't be discouraged when what was working last year or even last season doesn't work anymore. Small tests and changes can be just as effective as throwing it all out and starting over, and actually probably more effective and more time useful. We have gone through that a couple times now. I've only been at Penny's for 3 years, but when I first joined, it was this mentality, well, we got to throw it all out and start over, even though there was a lot of really good stuff there. And I think that's been a lot of our past 3 years is just tinkering and figuring out what does still serve us and what doesn't. Why did it stop serving us? How can we make sure that we're connecting to the customer as we want? Stay curious about that customer, right? And how they're responding both to the controllable factors and those things that are outside of our control. We spend a ton of time thinking about, well, we can't fix that. Tariffs are tariffs. We don't have anything to do with that. The weather. We're in retail. If somebody's not shopping spring, it's probably because of the weather. But we have to have those conversations and remind ourselves that customer still has a need. We just need to figure out how we connect with them in a way that makes us their stop, as opposed to all the other options that they have, because there are a lot of great options out there. And then finally, stay open-minded with your test and learns from your customer. Those learnings, be open to being right or being wrong. We were very convinced that if we showed you the stuff that you've purchased before, you would keep purchasing that. And that's not always the case. Also, be open to being right, being wrong, or the secret third thing, which is a non-finding, right? Like a inconclusive result is still an answer. And I think that ultimately has led us to a lot of, again, tinkering and learning that often in my past life we would have just set aside and well, it doesn't matter then. It doesn't matter to the customer, when the reality is maybe it was something we need to continue to test and needle on a little bit. So I think those are kind of the big things that we found from all this, and ultimately that lapsed customer is going to come back to you if you're able to intervene early and share with them, things that are relevant to their life and experience. And sometimes you got to tinker to find that. And that's it. Stay with the mic.
Questions?
Yes.
Thank you so much. That was so great. Question about, did you ever think about customer lifetime value at either like the individual or cohort level in any of like the lapsing or lapse campaigns?
For sure. So funny thing, whenever we got into all of our segmentation strategies, was we had an external partner that came in right at the same time I landed. So I always joke that I got to join a team of external partners when I first joined JCPenney. So it was good though, because you learn a lot really fast, because they get a lot of latitude that you wouldn't get if you're just an internal guy. They're paying them a lot more than they're paying me, so I can just tell them, maybe you should try this. Anyway, so we actually had two different axes that we're looking at. So we're looking at our customer segments, which was fantastic. We're trying to find some likenesses and purchase patterns and what we assume they move to, right? Like what are those adjacencies that we should be talking to them about? And the other piece was a ladder. So we had a value ladder where we're like, all right, this is a person who came in once. How do we get them to come in that second time within 90 days? Because now they're sticky, which is not something anybody should call a customer, but and then the next was, how do we get them to make a purchase of $100 or more? Like we had that ladder. So there were some things we did outside of the retention testing and learning that were very focused on how do we get you to shop more than one category? How do we get you to shop, or trial a different category? How do we get you to make a purchase again after that first 90 days, trying to push that customer, encourage them deeper into our value ladder is what we called it. We saw some success with that, actually. It was interesting because, again, it doesn't always have to be offer-led. And I think we're a 123-year-old company. We have some habits that are very offer-led. There was a period of time where we tried to go everyday low price, and it didn't work for us because our customer is different than that. So we had to kind of play with that, too. It's like every time you mention, well, we're not going to put prices in email, everyone was just like, are you trying to fail? Is that what we're doing right now? So we had to kind of work through that and encourage folks to open their minds a little bit and let us test tiny little audiences until we could grow it. But yeah, we try to use the ladder a little bit too to help guide how we talk to customers that are not in that lapsing state. We've got a lot to talk to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ramsey. I'm with Macy's, so a lot of similarities.
Cover your ears.
Um,
Forget everything I just said.
I'm curious, you talked about the trying to get customers into store versus online, and I'm curious how you're able to measure success beyond just the email metrics. Were you able to get them into the store and then have that behavior stick? Because I'm assuming it's very hard to kind of get a customer to change their behavior after so many years of going to a JCPenney or going to a Macy's or something like that.
For sure. So we're real big on some last touch attribution, which we had some conversations last night. I love it and hate it at the same time. Long time ago when I was at GameStop, we had a weighted attribution model. I was like, why couldn't I just steal that and bring it with me? Last touch, that's typically how we measure. So we, getting deep into the weeds, we have e-com reporting that we dig into and talk through on Monday. By Wednesday, we have store reporting, so we can kind of talk about that. Honestly, it kind of flexes, right? There's some moments where it's really important that we drive to store because we know those drive to store customers will be sticking around. They're a bit more loyal. But at the same time, we still need e-com to be successful. Right now, we're really kind of looking at this return to mall. We were just talking about this at breakfast this morning. There are kids who are absolutely enthralled with this idea of going in and looking at the thing and touching it before you buy it, which is fascinating to me because gross. I just want to buy it and be done. But I think that's been part of it too, is understanding which of our customers, we have segments that are very responsive to in-store messaging. And we have folks who will only ever shop us online. So we kind of have to make those decisions too. As we're audienceing.
Ryan from RPEO. 2 questions. Number one, in your offer strategy, you talked about 20 off of 50. Did you experiment or test into that with percentage off or dollar off?
Yep.
And then the second question is, were you able to do holdout groups? Did you want to? What was that discussion?
Yes. My favorite thing in the whole wide world is in the email space, having your partners come to you and say, we want to test something, and what they actually mean is do something, not actually test. So yeah, we had to push really hard on ensuring we had a holdout group and ensuring that we were controlling for that. This is supposed to be science, guys. So we did work through that. And we did it was like a multi-cell test where we had all these different groups pulled out. We actually did, trying to control as best we could for everything else going on around us, having those percentages versus the dollars off. And it's interesting. I don't know if it's a seasonal thing or if it's just they get tired of seeing something one way or the other, but we find that a percentage off sometimes works better than dollars off. It truly depends on what else is going on for the period before that. So I think that's one of those things we kind of have to test and play with every 3 to 6 months to make sure it's still valid. And just mix it up for that customer. I'm telling you, it's like a every 6-month argument about, should we be doing 30% off or should I be showing price points and then put that 30% off down here somewhere so they see it. It's the whole thing. God, yeah, no problem.
Hello, Chris Dorsey from Zeta Global.
Hello.
First, I want to do a shout out to JCPenney's because I only buy your sheets and pillowcases. The
Same.
Wrinkle Guard,
Yeah.
400th count, unbelievable. If anybody's looking for sheets, great deal. My question for you is, we were talking about hyper-personalization, customization, around messaging. Obviously, you guys have your first-party data, but I'm just curious, how do you augment that first-party data with additional third-party data, and really kind of building out a more complete profile of who your customers are beyond the data that you have in-house and in your CRM?
So here's the thing. This is all softballs. It's none of that. You don't get to bring hard questions to me, sir. No, honestly, it's something we're actually looking at, right? We have, we're right now really working through, we're now Catalyst brands, right? So we're now under a bigger umbrella. There's a lot of cross-pollination of those audiences that's in our future. We're not there yet. But that is something that's come up many times, and we're a 123-year-old company with data that's been around for a minute. Some of that data may not be, the same fidelity as we'd like it to be to do some of the things we'd like to do. There's a lot of partnership with our internal product team to get stuff pulled in, and we have data latencies, right? Like our why am I telling you guys all of this? I feel so close right now. No, but our loyalty data being housed elsewhere and having some latency there. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to bridge currently and thinking through and working with our new sister brands to say, how have you approached this? And that's a lot of what we're doing. I imagine the next year or so is sorting that out. But thanks for asking.
All right, final question over here.
Hello, Kelly with Stencil.
Hi.
So really appreciate the depth of how you went into doing so many tests for a specific cohort. Curious of how you created the bandwidth to do this? Like, is it you got headcount to focus on this, you used an external agency or partner, or you said no to other things that were considered like always on, must do to try this out? Because I hear that being like the number one issue is like, we want to test, we want to do more, but like we don't have the capacity.
Right. I think it's very cute that you said that we got more headcount. It would never happen, man. No, but I hear what you're saying. It was interesting because what we had to do, and I've had a couple of conversations about this morning, we've been on Salesforce for several years now. And when I first joined, I remember being very excited because I'm an expert in the email space. I'm going to come in, we're going to get on templates, and everything's going to get easier. And everyone who I told that to just looked at me like I was crazy. I was like, we do this a certain way around here, and you're just going to have to fall in line. And they're app teachers, right? They understand exactly how we needed to approach content. We've gotten to the place now where our wonderful partnership with our creative team, and they helped us produce content. It was specifically because of these tests, we got to a really clean place with templated content so that we were able to swap in and out content easily. I didn't shout out to Movable Ink yet. I should. There were some instances where we were able to leverage Movable Ink to get some of the quick turn stuff around instead of us having to depend so heavily on our creative teams. But no, we didn't get any more resources, and we weren't allowed to say no. That's the fun part about being an email. You say yes, and so it was a lot of us just figuring it out. But I think templatizing some of the pieces, getting a little bit less precious, that something can still be polished in quality without it having to be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, got us through all of that. But we learned a lot, and there are a lot of those pieces that, we learned something, we had to set it away and say, we won't be repeating this, or things that we said, this is now part of our quarterly refresh. We're going to do these, on a regular basis. They'll be triggered, and we need to make sure they get refreshed so the content's new. So, yeah, we had to get templated is basically the answer.
All right. Thank you, Sonia. Really
Yes, sir.
appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.